Today we're joined by Shawn Wells and Daniel Solomons. Can you guys say something to let our audience know who is who?
Should I introduce Daniel?
Yeah, that's Shawn's laugh.
There you go.
Okay, well, Daniel Solomons is the CEO of Update, a nootropic energy drink that features the breakthrough ingredient that I was involved in bringing to market and patenting called Infinity, of which the actual chemical compound is paraxanthine, and it's a caffeine metabolite. And Daniel is a tour de force in the industry of being disruptive. Like Update, it really has kind of a cool marketing swag to it, if you will. It's got some, like, if you're looking at the video, it's got like a cool look. It looks like a battery, and it's going to like supercharge you. Like they're playing around with crypto and NFT and gaming and in all these markets, bringing on all these incredible influencers and thought leaders, people like the Mark Hymans of the world, and all kinds of like rappers, brilliant musicians, just actors, actresses, just all kinds of stuff is happening around the Update brand. And it's quite exciting. So that's Daniel Solomons.
All right, so that was Shawn introducing Daniel. And for those that are watching this, that'll be a lot easier. And now, Daniel, let's see how well you know Shawn.
So now you can see this bromance we have going on, spanning at least 3 years. Shawn is one of the greatest formulators, the only formulator I've worked with, but one of the greatest formulators that everyone else has worked with. He's an award-winning author. He's formulated over 500 different products, including Update, which is the energy drink that we started together. And he's an all-around, just really amazing human. And been really great to get to, be one of my really great friends.
Thank you.
Well, that is perfect. And Shawn, I want to touch on your framework of the energy formula, what it stands for, the acronym, briefly. And before we do, I like to warm up with the unusuals or non-negotiables you've done for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony today.
I worked out at 5 a.m. this morning, and I work out with an amazing trainer here in Dallas who is, he's not focused on, simply hypertrophy. It's very much neurological training, and it's exciting stuff. Like we're working on my gait, my drive, and my sprint. We're working on my mobility, like down to like my big toe and ankle mobility. And it's really cool, like the stuff that we're doing. So that's exciting for myself. And it's one of those things where I feel the benefit throughout my day. Like it's improving my quality of life dramatically. And also, like, part of my non-negotiables has been keeping my bedtime and wake time the same 7 days a week. This is something I'm really proud of. I'm moving beyond what's called social jet lag, where you have on the weekends, this 3 hour, 4 hour later bedtime that really, has a toll that it takes on you throughout the rest of the week. So I've been focused on getting to bed between 8 and 9 o'clock. I know that seems crazy for some people, but and getting up at 5. So that's been my focus of late. And I've been training a lot more, sometimes even two times a day right now. So I've also been taking a nap when I can fit it in during the day of like an hour. I've been eating probably about 30% more calories, hydrating more. So those are some of my non-negotiables. I'm taking time to refuel and at the same time push my body.
Mm-hmm. Daniel?
I think Shawn had some really good ones, which I wish I could still. But no, I think routine is really important for me as well. I train every day I do strength training, and then also as of late, actually been incorporating Pilates, which I find to be not only incredibly therapeutic and almost like an active recovery training that I put throughout the week, which I think has helped me from like a mobility standpoint dramatically. So that's really big. And then also just really trying to focus on eating like whole natural ingredients, steering clear of like snack food and food that has too many ingredients on the label that I don't know what they are. And rather steer towards more of like a vegetable meat diet.
It's funny how a lot of times it comes back to the same core themes across the board. And one thing you both mentioned was habit, and having a stable circadian rhythm. A consistent sleep wake time is a huge one that's been talked about since the early days of Ayurveda. So glad to hear that we're all on the same page there. And now let's go on to something around paraxanthine, which will be the topic of today's show. Why is this something that you find exciting?
So paraxanthine is really exciting. I came to know it around 3 years ago when Shawn introduced it to me. At the time, we started to formulate update, and Shawn said, "Hey Daniel, I have an ingredient that you should know about." And he sends me a bag of white capsules, no description as to what they are, and he says, "Just try it and let me know what you think." And so I take this, and all of a sudden, I drink coffee. I've had caffeine in different formats. And all of a sudden, this was the first time I felt something that was far more akin to, being in the zone and being really focused as opposed to the frenetic energy I would typically get from a coffee. And what was really interesting about this was I didn't feel jittery at all. I didn't crash a few hours after consuming it. And then I was able to have a great sleep. And I was like, wow, Shawn, what is this? And that's when he told me what paraxanthine is. And so if you're listening, the way it works is paraxanthine isn't something net new. It's not something to be like spooked out about despite, it being called paraxanthine, but it is in every caffeine compound. So whether you're consuming caffeine in a coffee, in tea, in energy drinks, it breaks down in your liver. It metabolizes into three molecules, theobromine, theophylline, and paraxanthine. The majority of caffeine actually breaks down into paraxanthine to the tune of about 80%. And what's been found is that paraxanthine is actually the molecule that's attributed to all the energy and the focus you get from your caffeine experience without having any of the side effects that you're used to, battling with. Yeah, Shawn, is there anything else you want to add to that?
That's Daniel's trying to like steal my thunder now. I don't like I barely have anything left to say. Daniel's getting so good at the science, so he's kind of pushing me to the side now. It's look, the thing is with paraxanthine, as Daniel mentioned, it is a caffeine metabolite, and you may be like, okay, well, and like Daniel said, like anywhere from like 70 to 80%, depending on what molecules you're looking at, is converted to paraxanthine from caffeine. So you may say, well, I've had 1,000 doses, 10,000 doses of caffeine in my life. I know what paraxanthine is. No, you don't. Here's why. This is like, and people ask me this all the time, like, how was paraxanthine like not brought to the market until this point? How was this not patented? How was this not studied in this way? I'm like, look, I got a couple reasons. I think one, up until more recently, we didn't know that it occurred naturally. It does. We have about 5 natural sources that we've found it in. Granted, it's small amounts, but it does occur naturally. And two, I think because a lot converted from caffeine to paraxanthine, people just assumed I'm getting plenty of it. Why do I need to take it? Here's what's happening though. About 50-60% of us are slow metabolizers of caffeine, depending on how you look at this genetically, with the CYP1A2 gene. And then there's a good portion that are fast metabolized. Slow metabolizers, you're saying like, I have caffeine, but I have headaches, I have anxiety, I have sleep disruption, mood disruption, I can't focus. It's more side effects than benefits. And then with fast metabolism, you have people that are saying, I can have caffeine and go straight to sleep. They're not getting the benefit, but at least they're not getting the side effects.
Yeah.
What we're finding is that this 3-methyl position, and caffeine is 1,3,7 trimethylxanthine, which gets converted to paraxanthine and removes that 3-methyl group. It detoxifies this compound dramatically. It has about 1/10 the toxicity. And when we look at theobromine and theophylline, the other compounds, they're fairly toxic. Theophylline is very toxic. A lot of side effects, bronchodilator control drug. All of these compounds have toxicity associated with them in different species. Caffeine is actually in plants to be toxic to insects. It's an insect repellent for plants. And as you know, theobromine, like think of chocolate, cats and dogs aren't supposed to have chocolate, it can kill them. That's because of the theobromine. And what we see with paraxanthine is it does not have the toxicity. So you don't have the side effects. You're not getting punished with not only sitting there in caffeine for hours and hours and hours. And by the way, the slow metabolizers, that can be like 10 and a half, even up to 12 hours for a half-life, meaning 3 days later, you still have caffeine in your body. And for the fast metabolizers, it can be an hour and a half. So dramatic difference. So we're taking that bioindividuality out of the equation. And now the thing that actually gives you the benefit is not caffeine, it's paraxanthine. So now you're removing caffeine out of the equation. You're not getting the side effects. You're removing theophylline and theobromine out of the equation. You're not getting that toxicity or side effects. You're just going to the pure source, and everyone gets to experience it the same way, similar half-life. You remove the bioindividuality, you get all the benefit, and you don't have the toxicity, you don't have the side effects, you don't have the sleep disruption, the arrhythmia, the anxiety, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You just get the benefits. And the benefits destroy caffeine. We can go into that, but that's where the experience is very different. It's not just like, oh, I can take caffeine and get paraxanthine. It's a wholly different experience. And I think you can attest to this, Nick, and obviously Daniel as well.
Yeah, I was thinking that exact same thing. And so to summarize, there's 3 main metabolites of caffeine. The other 2 might be also present in certain foods and other products and everything, but they don't have the same therapeutic benefits, and they have a lot of downsides, such as I believe chocolate's rich in theobromine.
Right.
But those aren't what you're really looking for. What you want, what we're used to, the feel-good effects of caffeine that we all love and crave, come from paraxanthine specifically.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And what we see is paraxanthine, when you remove these other compounds and you remove the toxicity and side effects and bioindividuality, like think about this idea of like, oh, like yes, 70 to 80% is converting, like Daniel said, but at what rate? That's the difference. When you're a slow metabolizer, yeah, eventually over the next week, you'll get some paraxanthine. That's very different from having paraxanthine now and boom, without the side effects, without all these issues, just having the thing that gives you the energy, the clarity. For people that are really slow metabolizers, they have never, ever felt paraxanthine before.
Yes.
This would be the first time. And honestly, with fast metabolizers, we kind of see this too, because they don't really get much benefit. They just go straight to sleep and, whatever. And it tends to be only these people that are in that kind of Goldilocks zone, as we talk about in science, is like they're in that sweet spot, right? Where they actually have, not that much side effects, but, enough benefits that their way of metabolizing caffeine is ideal enough that they're experiencing it well. But that's probably less than 10, 15% of the population, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So I've done a deep dive on the research, and I actually created a YouTube video that dives more in depth into all of this. And one thing that I realized a couple of years ago was just how variable people's responses to caffeine are. And I was thinking about the half life. And if you're a slow metabolizer, how much can be in your bloodstream if you have just say 2 cups, 200 milligrams at 11 a.m., noon? You're going to have a significant amount in your bloodstream when you go to sleep. And so you're not going to be getting the same performance benefits, which is why we see that people's performance tends to plateau and they're not getting any benefit of caffeine. They're just going back to baseline. And I think what you're saying about the individual variability, the bio-individuality component, that's why through the ancestral lens, Ayurveda recommended coffee only in small quantities for one of the different constitutions. The other two were recommended not to have it at all, which for me is a huge bummer because I happen to fall into one of the two that shouldn't have it. So it's cool to hear that there might be a better approach. And from what I've experienced, there is a better approach that sidesteps the whole issue of bio-individuality.
100%. And when we look at that, like even if you look at the studies now, like when we can go back, there's some studies that were done where we didn't look at the CYP1A2 gene, but now where they've gone back and looked at it and they see the studies where there were benefits, where there was like ergogenic benefits, meaning like physical performance or neurological cognitive benefits in terms of like maybe test performance or whatever. Either way, where there was benefits, those were the people that leaned towards fast metabolism. And the people that had slow metabolism had not only no benefit, but had negative effects. It actually hurt their performance. And so now when we look at these studies and you see like a lot of times the data is very equivocal, that's why. It's because of these metabolism differences. And when we delineate those, we start seeing where that's coming out. But now that we're doing our data on paraxanthine in the form of infinity, we're seeing that there's consistent benefit across the board, across all people, that they're getting the nootropic benefits, they're getting the ergogenic benefits, their performance is increasing both neurologically and physiologically.
Mm-hmm. So I rarely drink plain black coffee these days. I like to doctor it up with all kinds of other ingredients to smooth out some of the felt side effects and some of the ones that I don't necessarily feel, but might be taking a toll on my body in different ways. What are the typical side effects of caffeine that people experience? Like, why is it important? Do we want to consider this in addition to the less toxicity? Because if someone's consuming caffeine regularly, they might not be too wary of the toxicity because they feel fine still.
Yeah, I mean, it's a CNS toxicant, like where your central nervous system. So, you know, it's having a pretty profound effect on epinephrine, norepinephrine, certainly adenosine inhibition. But you're getting, you know, cortisol spiking. You're getting like your body's trying to detoxify this compound. It doesn't want this compound. And again, for most people. And so you're getting the anxiety, that sleep disruption, like where it's affecting quantity and quality. Certainly anyone who's tracked HRV can see how it dramatically affects the heart rate variability. If you're using an Oura ring, a Whoop strap, a Garmin Phoenix, you know, even I think the iWatch now does it, or you know, Samsung's watch, or whatever you're looking at. Like most people have some kind of wearable that's looking at HRV, and you can see how it's affecting your sleep quality and quantity. You're not staying asleep as well. You're not getting into as deep and restful sleep. You're not getting as many hours of sleep, and therefore you're not getting the recovery, and therefore you're lacking the resilience. And then what do you do when you wake up with not enough sleep and you're tired, but you need to perform?
More coffee.
You take more caffeine. So you're like going down this spiral. And that's why it leads to adrenal fatigue. And we're not seeing things like that with paraxanthine. We're skipping all of that. And this really is a downward spiral for many. So I can't even, like, when you talk about sleep, a friend of mine, if she's not been on your show, you should have her on your show, Molly Eastman. She used to be Molly McLaughlin, great sleep biohacker, really great friend. But man, look, even at 6.5 hours of sleep, your brain is acutely insulin resistant. So it's not able to take up the glucose as well to fuel these neurons. So you feel that brain fog and fatigue. And if you do this consistently, you have type 3 diabetes of the brain. You essentially have like Alzheimer's in your brain.
Yeah.
And when you're not getting sleep as well, and again, 6.5 hours, I mean, that's like a lot for some people. And I'm talking like that's not enough, that they're 5 times as likely for type 2 diabetes, and they're 3 times as likely for coronary heart disease. And, you know, people that are working like that third shift that have work shift displacement syndrome are living 30% shorter lives.
Wow.
So like this, like sleep, and then I don't even get me on like sleep apnea, which a lot of people that are highly caffeinated that need to like unwind with alcohol in the evening, double whammy.
Oh man.
Sleep apnea is like a recipe for death. And if people don't know what sleep apnea is, it's like when you're struggling to breathe, it's not just snoring, it's like that gagging and not getting enough oxygen in. If that is happening, you know, 1, 2, 3 years max, like you can be dead. It's no joke. Like you're fighting instead of recovering at night, you're fighting for your life. It's like full on sympathetic nervous system, choking, gagging, not getting enough air. It's like getting strangled every night for hours. So, you know, this is like a fast recipe for death. And this is like what a lot of people are fighting. And to be honest, caffeine is playing a role in all of that.
Yeah. I think it was Dr. Daniel Amen mentioned that if he was an evil tyrant and wanted to destroy the mental health of everyone, he would force them to drink coffee in the morning and alcohol at night to wind down, because that's creating the perfect storm of
Terrible
toxicity sleep and forcing like artificial changes in brain chemistry like that. So there's obviously a lot there with the sleep specifically, but then coffee also has other properties that might not be beneficial, such as its effect on digestion and dehydration, and I'm sure many other things as well.
It's a bit of a mixed bag. They've shown that, I will say, they've shown that coffee has much better outcomes when it comes to longevity and being anti-disease versus caffeine. And I think the biggest difference there is the polyphenols. In particular, in coffee, it's chlorogenic acid, but you know, in tea, there's catechins, and you know, there's a host of polyphenols, things like apigenin, fisetin, resveratrol, pterostilbene, quercetin. These things, like when you look at the blue zones, like I've talked about in my book, the energy formula, like those are the places where you have these super centenarians, and they're consuming a lot of polyphenols. There's a number of other things that they're doing, but I do think coffee or tea is a better way to have your caffeine than having caffeine anhydrous in these energy drinks and things like that, for sure. But best solution, infinity.
Yeah. I was hoping that you guys would create a product that concentrates the natural source, because there's probably other things in there, like you're saying with coffee, the polyphenols and all kinds of other flavonoids and terpenes and different things like that, other constituents. Is that possible?
It is possible. And we're doing research on synergists right now with Infinity. So we've done a lot of work with animals, and we're about 50 ingredients in to seeing what synergizes. Interestingly, the number one synergist was another, and we did not plan this way. Like the number one synergist was actually another ingredient that we just released called dileucine, which is an ingredient that promotes muscle protein synthesis. So fascinatingly, they had like the most profound effect with each other. But a number of the other compounds that were up there are actually ones that we have patented and are in update. And so like alpha GPC, tyrosine. These compounds have synergy with the paraxanthine. Alpha GPC is going to be a cholinergic and promote acetylcholine. And we also see that benefit with paraxanthine. Paraxanthine is also dopaminergic, as is tyrosine. So you're getting that kind of benefit across the board. You even have 5-HTP in here, which can promote serotonin. And also, we're seeing that paraxanthine increases serotonin levels. So there's definitely some synergy with these compounds, and they were put in there for great reason.
Yeah.
And by the way, at full doses, these aren't like fairy dusted, like 99% of energy drinks out there that include ginseng and whatever. And it's like in 1 milligram, L-carnitine, 1 milligram, like all this nonsense that's in all these energy drinks. It makes me so angry.
Yeah, a lot of times it's a flashy label with virtually none of the expensive active ingredient that we want and lots of the cheap fillers. And one thing I noticed in my own research into paraxanthine is that some of the papers I read said that it has a stronger dopaminergic effect than caffeine does, which would be great for motivation and drive and focusing for long periods on end.
100%. I mean, Daniel, like, what's been your experience on it?
Yeah, I think one thing we've found from, my own experience, but then also from all the hundreds and thousands of people who are drinking Update is exactly that. It's the experience that you're having is really more of this motivational drive. It's like uncompromising energy fueled with motivation, as opposed to like the frenetic energy, like an overstimulation, like I mentioned earlier. And I think that plays exactly to it.
Yeah, we're seeing like this a term come up. We've actually filed intellectual property around it. It's going to sound silly, but it came up so much that we were like, okay, well, this is a word to describe how people feel. It was swagger. And I kid you not, like it came up a lot. And dopamine is associated with this mood lift, this confidence, this ability to focus and be productive. It's also associated with like the reward center, like when you do something well and like your brain rewards you for it. It's like that's dopamine. So like there's this swagger that comes through that's very different from having an energy drink normally or pre-workout or whatever that's caffeinated. This is a very different experience.
What's the net effect when you bring up a bunch of different neurotransmitters all at the same time, such as acetylcholine with alpha GPC, with dopamine via paraxanthine and N-acetyltyrosine, and then also serotonin with 5-HTP? If you're bringing everything, not everything, but multiple up at once, is that going to deliver a targeted effect, or do you want to bring up just one or two at the same time?
This is a great question. And look, I do a whole talk around this, like I've done on psychedelics in particular, and why SSRIs are equivocal at best, and maybe counterproductive, because SSRIs focus purely on serotonin, and that's just one neurotransmitter. When we feel good, when we are not depressed, all of the neurotransmitters come up. When people are depressed, it's not just serotonin that's down. All the neurotransmitters, like all 10 of them, are down because your body wants you to feel less and experience less. So this is like the huge difference there is it's about this holistic lift of neurotransmitters. Now, if you were blowing them all out, that wouldn't be healthy. I mean, that would be maybe akin to like doing a plant medicine journey or something like that. But this is more akin to, doing something that's just enjoyable. Like when you work out or like when you go to a baseball game, if you love that, or a concert, or, whatever it is that you get enjoyment from, you get a lift of neurotransmitters. And that's what we're seeing with paraxanthine, is that it's lifting the majority of them. We're exploring some of the other ones. We haven't looked at all of them yet, but we've looked at several, and it seems to be having an effect on histamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine. We still have to look at a few others, but it does seem that way, that this is just about like an energy and mood lift.
When I initially got my can of update, I was a bit hesitant because of the N-acetylcysteine, or not cysteine, tyrosine,
Tyrosine.
the
Mm-hmm.
NALT. Because when I've taken that previously in isolation, I've noticed that I get splitting headaches and I feel a bit robotic. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
what that is or why that would be. But for some reason with this, I don't feel that at all.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point. When you take a lot of these things, typically are underdosed and fairy dusted, but there are products out there that are, especially from nootropic companies, that are way overdosed. Especially if you buy the solo ingredient, a lot of times they're giving you like these massive, multi-gram doses and whatever, and it absolutely can, blow you out. And especially like when it comes to neurochemistry, everyone's is different.
Yeah.
So this is where like subtle is better, certainly, than going over the top. And for you, that may give you splitting headaches, but someone else may get like a great lift from it. But it's so different from person to person. But what we're finding is not only is Paraxanthine Infinity, having a great effect across the board with, I mean, I think we're at like 98, 99% positive feedback. It's kind of insane. But also we're seeing that with this formula with update is it's just the other word that comes up a lot besides swagger. Daniel, you tell me, like, it's clean, right? I
Yeah,
hear that word all the
that's
time.
exactly it. I mean, I think, Nick, when we set out on the update journey, part of the reason I think none of us really drunk energy drinks before was because they had copious amounts of caffeine and they were sweetened with sugar or artificial sweeteners like aspartame or sucralose. They had a ton of ingredients on the label, but like Shawn mentioned, kind of feather dusted in there to make the claim that they have the ingredients, and they would taste really quite awful, with like unidentifiable flavors. I was at the store the other day, and there was a can of C4, and I think it was C4, but it was Tetris flavor. So like, I'll give you $10 if you can tell me what Tetris flavor is. Um, and then they're in these like giant 16-ounce cans. And so, part of the challenge to Shawn was, how can we create a product that delivers on all the efficacy that you want, right? So putting in full doses of these ingredients. To our detriment, the product ends up being really expensive to produce. But for the customer, you have this amazing experience. And how do you put it in a 12-ounce can as opposed to a 16-ounce can and still have it taste good, and then not use
Yeah.
artificial sickly sweet sweeteners and still have it taste even better? And that was a real challenge.
Yeah, you guys really cracked the code. And without even knowing it, that was the exact word I used to describe the experience: clean. I had no idea that was what you guys were also hearing back from plenty of other users. But even compared to my daily coffee, or mostly daily coffee, I take the weekends off. It just feels much lighter and cleaner. Like the headspace feels much more open and, I guess, less tunnel vision than coffee does. And that was not something I was expecting. And I don't ever drink energy drinks aside from this. And mainly because of those reasons. They have a ton of caffeine, they have all kinds of shady, disgusting ingredients, and they mask a lot of them with taurine or other calming amino acids or ingredients. So it's refreshing to see the company that's not taking shortcuts and is actually including the therapeutic doses of each ingredient, and also is not selling it for $10, $15 per can.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what's really cool
Exactly.
is there are a number of people. Actually, our head of sales happens to be one of these that falls into that slow metabolizer basket where the thought of an energy drink or coffee is just like so worrisome for them. They're able to drink this,
Hmm.
and
Totally.
experience, for the first time, like energy that they want from a coffee without having to be worried about any of the side effects. And so, what we're finding in a lot of these stores when we're doing samplings, listening to customers, is there are a bunch of people who the thought of caffeine is really scary and now able to drink this to get what they want. They're getting no side effects that they would typically be scared of. And so it's not just people who drink Red Bull and Monster that we're hoping to now drink Update, but there's this whole group of people who couldn't drink any of this stuff. And now there's a solution for them. And then in addition to that, to kind of touch on your point, I think, most people you ask, I think like at least 88%, I think there was a stat I read, but like 88% of people, if you ask them, are going to want to reduce their caffeine consumption. Whether it's a rational thought that they have as to why or not, most people will tell you they drink too much coffee. And, all of a sudden there's a solution to get that like afternoon kick without, feeling bloated or having to, hold your stomach after drinking a cup of coffee. And what else is really neat is with Paraxanthine and Infinity, what I've found, and I don't know about you, Nick and Shawn, but I can drink this every day for 2 weeks, and then I can stop drinking it, go cold turkey, and I don't have any headaches or any kind of disruption to my mood or to my body or to my metabolism that I would otherwise have had experience with caffeine. And I think that's also something great about this product.
I want to interrupt you right there because I'm actually doing a caffeine tolerance reset right now. Every quarter, I will do 10 to 14 days off of caffeine just to resensitize my adenosine receptors and so when I go back to caffeine, I actually feel every sip I'm taking, I guess, via coffee. But I'm curious your experience with like the adenosine resensitization and to restore the body so that I'm getting the effects of normal caffeine. If I use Paraxanthine, is that counterproductive? And I'm mainly using it the first couple of days off of caffeine, so I still feel good, and I'm not going to experience any of the withdrawals or headaches or problems with staying awake during the day.
Yeah, we don't have research per se on that. That's an interesting question. But I can tell you that we don't see the habituation and adaptation. Those are the effects that Daniel's really speaking of. Is habituation is the need to be the physiologic dependence on it. There's literally rodent studies where by the third day on the caffeine, they needed that dose to get to baseline. They're not getting above and beyond. They're like, when people are like, I'm at these shows in, Vegas, and there's a zillion people there, and I see like 1,000 people in line at a Starbucks. I mean, they're really like, they say like, oh, I need my coffee to get going. They're not joking. They literally need their coffee to get going, like to get to baseline. So there is a real dependence. And then the adaptation effect is that you need more and more and more to get the same effect. You have that desensitization that you're talking about. And we don't see that with Paraxanthine, either one of those. And what's really interesting is you don't experience like a crash or a fall off really either. I call it like this afterglow period where, yes, there's like adenosine inhibition and there's the wakefulness. But when we're looking at our preclinical data, which means the animal data, so we haven't looked at this in humans yet, but you could extrapolate a lot of these ideas, is that we're seeing, like I said, the serotonin, the dopamine, we're seeing the nitric oxide increase via PDE9 inhibition in the brain. We're seeing increased glutathione and catalase, these incredible antioxidants, and reduced oxidative stress. We're seeing increased BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor for neuroplasticity. We're seeing reduced beta amyloid plaque. I mean, it's literally making the brain healthier. Like amyloid plaques associated with Alzheimer's. The decreased dopamines associated with Parkinson's. A number of these degenerative conditions, you see decreased nitric oxide to certain parts of the brain, which means blood flow. And certainly, as we age, we have less fluid intelligence, which means that neuroplasticity, the ability to take on new tasks and kind of rewire your brain. So literally, this is protecting your brain from aging and keeping it younger as we're looking at this data. So, I feel like that has a lot to do with this afterglow where people are saying like, I just felt great all day, not just for like a few hours, like all day. Like, and then you ask them like, well, when did you feel it kind of drop off? And they're like, I don't know. I get that answer a lot. Like, they're like, I'm not sure. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I definitely experienced the afterglow. It's hard to pinpoint when exactly it completely wears off. There's no obvious or discernible crash in my experience. And I know that although the half life isn't as long as caffeine, I believe, it
Mhm.
seems to have like strong wakefulness promoting effects for me for just as long as caffeine. I mean, when I haven't done it in the afternoon and tried to sleep, or even in the evening and tried to sleep, but I drank one at like 10 a.m. couple weeks back, and I tried to take a nap at 4 p.m. and there was no way I was napping. I still felt great and I didn't need a nap, but I was just curious if I could nap.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you'll feel it's like optimization essentially that's happening. It's not like, I feel like caffeine is this come at a cost ingredient that we've come to know
Mhm.
and almost have this like abusive relationship with. But paraxanthine infinity has this optimization effect where we're literally operating at our best. Like, again, like, because these neurotransmitters, blood flow is up, like the brain is more plastic and ability and able to take on new tasks, and you feel more productive and energized and lifted, and all of this is taking place. So it's a very different feeling. It's not coming at a cost. It's actually, and we're seeing in research we're doing now that there's actually a time effect where the more you take it, the more consistently you take it, going back to what you were talking about before, the better it works and the better your health. And I think it has a lot to do with the way it's actually improving the health of your brain.
I'm still curious if I was to cycle off of coffee for 2 weeks and I was to go on to paraxanthine or have update instead every single day. At the end of those 2 weeks, and if I went back to caffeine, how would how would I react? Is there a cross tolerance between the two?
I mean, I can answer that and I'll let Daniel jump in. Like, I mean, one, in our data, we saw that stacking the two every single time we looked at this is counterproductive. Um, but I will also say when people get on paraxanthine and then they go back to caffeine, they are shocked about like how bad and dirty it feels. And they're just like, it's kind of the opposite of clean. They're like, that was a really dirty experience, and I forgot what that was like or what I got used to. And now that I know this new experience, I never want to go back. What do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think for me personally, I was someone that used to be a 5 cups a day coffee drinker. And, but by the time you get to like that third cup or fourth cup or fifth cup, you feel like you need it and you always go for it. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, why did I do that? You feel terrible. And now I'm down to 1 cup in the morning purely because of like to what we kind of circled back earlier at the beginning of the discussion about like ritual and habits. I have, a habit to have a hot drink in the morning, and, a cup of coffee happens to cool down faster than a cup of tea. So I go for a coffee. But now it's an update, mid morning or after lunch to get me through the day. And like I said, I can drink this for 2 weeks, stop cold turkey, and I'm completely fine. Whereas with coffee, I'll drink coffee. If I stop drinking coffee for one day, that evening I've already got a headache, you know, and so you don't get that. So I'm really interested to hear how your 2 week fast goes.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm curious about decaf coffee and how that would stack, if it would stack nicely, because then you can still get some of the polyphenols. Granted, if it's a high quality decaffeination coffee, but you get polyphenols and you get some of the benefits of caffeine without getting the caffeine, or not caffeine, of coffee without the caffeine. And then you can stack paraxanthine on top of that and get the feel good effects of that molecule without some of the side effects.
Yeah, I do a decaf coffee in the morning. I actually do a cold brew so I can have higher
Mm,
levels of the antioxidants, have less acid, higher levels of polyphenols.
Yeah.
And then I do like a frother to actually heat it up. And so I add heavy cream, MCTs, collagen to that decaffeinated cold brew. And that's what I have first thing in the morning. It's actually been shown it's better to not have the caffeine first thing, again, adrenally.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to kind of wait 2 or 3 hours. So, and then, I do like Daniel, I have my update, around 10 o'clock or something like that.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think,
that's
Nick, there's something to the idea of like consciously making the switch from coffee to an energy alternative that I think is really important. If you want to cut down on caffeine, part of that statement is like, I want to cut down on coffee. And so consciously making the decision, I think also, not only kind of amplifies your mental experience, but also, just your position around consuming paraxanthine in lieu of.
And choosing yourself, right? Like choosing what's good for your health. It's really interesting, Daniel, that number you came up with. I didn't know that, because the number of people consuming a caffeine source globally is 90%. So 88% think that they're having too much caffeine of the
wow.
90% that are having caffeine every day. So there's just 2% that are like, you know what? I'm good with this caffeine. That's hilarious. I mean, that is a staggering number when you think about those two things. Like, there's only 2% of people that are consuming caffeine that are like, I'm good with it.
But it kind of
Yeah.
makes sense. Like if you can have something that gives you the utility you get and desire from caffeine without the undesirable effects, like why wouldn't you make the switch?
Exactly.
It also shows how powerful that physiologic addiction is too, and how chronically underslept we are.
Yeah.
There's a lot that you can unpack. And by the way, like you were talking about with alcohol really affects HRV too. If
Mm-hmm.
I ever drink alcohol, I try and, one, if it's in the evening, it's like I keep it to one drink slowly, like sipped like wine. It's not too bad. But like if you're like going to consume multiple drinks, and that's a thing, it's way better to do that like earlier in the day and certainly hydrate along with it than it is to like, I mean, you're already like staying up later than normal with your social jet lag on Friday or Saturday. Then you're overstimulated with blue light and music. And you might be around toxic relationships. Then you're like, getting the alcohol in. And then you're having caffeine with it, like Red Bull
Oh,
vodka. And it's
yeah.
like, do you think this is a recipe for quality sleep and health? Come on.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I also noticed that on day 3, day 4, somewhere around that window, of no caffeine, I noticed that my baseline energy, my baseline mood, all of these things that I seek through coffee tend to improve, tend to increase above what they are when I'm actually actively drinking coffee.
That's why, like, there's this, you make these anchors, these psychosomatic anchors, right? Like, so I think it's really good to not have the physiologic dependence. Even if you are consuming caffeine, you're not going to do update, you're not going to do paraxanthine, whatever. Make sure to not associate it with, like, I need to wake up, I need this
Yeah.
thing. It's really affecting like all your hormones, neurotransmitters. You're like kind of waking up groggy. You're not looking forward to waking up, on and on and on. It's much better to like get a healthy wake cycle and habits. And then, when, if you want it, need it, whatever, like we said at, 9, 10, 11 o'clock or whatever in the afternoon, then that's the time. But I do think it's a very unhealthy habit to like that we become so dependent on it. Like, first thing, like we can't even get out of bed practically without it.
Yeah. Even if you just go outside for a half an hour first thing in the morning, then you spend another 15 minutes or so in the sunlight, that time and that
Hmm.
alignment with the circadian rhythm and with the sun and the movement, that alone creates a pretty noticeable spike in my energy and my motivation, drive, and all that stuff. And so then when I go drink coffee after an hour, 2 hours after I wake up, I can get by on a much smaller cup, a much lower dose than I would if I was to roll out of bed and have my coffee pot on a instant timer.
I am super sensitive to light, like where I get very depressed when it's dark or gray, seasonal affective disorder. But on the flip side, when I get blue light early on, I get super energized.
Yeah.
And so I've been using, even when I travel, like these, I have a portable light panel that's about the size of my, book like this. It's about the same size. And I mean, I just hold it right here. The photoreceptors are in the corner of your eye and actually in your ear. I hold it like right here in 10 minutes and like it feels like boom, like I feel super energized. So you want to reduce blue light in the evening, certainly, but sometimes when first thing in the morning can really help get you going. It's great if you can get natural blue light, but if it's dark when you get up or you're, in a place that's far up north or, whatever, the winter, it's been gray, like that's a great way to get your energy up.
I want to go back to the ingredients in Update. And I'm curious specifically. I know that I've read some comments about people concerned about the precursors to dopamine and serotonin, the 5-HTP, the tyrosine. What do you find in terms of contraindications? Are people are doing okay with this? It sounded like they were. Or are there any people that should not use Update?
I mean, we're not hearing that at all. Would I say like, cautiously that someone should be, careful if they're already on high dosed SSRIs, anxiolytics, already doing like a half gram of caffeine a day on new vigil, on Adderall, on, like on and on and on. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I would say that with just about anything. I would say don't drink energy drinks. I would say don't use a pre workout. Like, so look, it's dramatically safer than caffeine, which again is used by 90% of the population. So at the end of the day, this is a far safer choice. Should you proceed with caution, like and put your own health first? Of course, but like you can always, try. I mean, do a half of one, whatever,
Yeah.
and like just see where you're at, and assess your tolerance. Like, you don't have to like pound the whole thing, or you could also have it again later in the day, like 10 o'clock. Have it with food, like just see where you're at, like. But that would be the advice that I would give.
That was the thing I was thinking. I chugged the entire can when I first tried it. And then afterward, I had a thought that maybe I should just try half of a can or a quarter can to start with, but it was too late. Luckily, I had no problems, but I'm guessing if someone is sensitive to those other ingredients and they're worried, that's a pretty solid route to go.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'll let Daniel jump in a second. But like at the end of the day, anything that's effective, anything that's fully dosed and effective at what it does, like has a potential to have some kind of side effect in some person. But obviously, we formulated this to be super safe, and it's dramatically safer than these other energy drink alternatives or even coffees, or people that are having quad espressos, or people that are having Adderall and other new vigil and provigil and all these things to kind of stay awake and keep going. We found that this is a very safe alternative, and not only safe, it's a healthy choice, as I was pointing out, all the things that it's doing to promote brain health.
Yeah, I actually found that the effects I feel from this are similar to a very low dose of modafinil. And I get that productivity, I get the focus, I get the wakefulness, but I don't feel drained right after. There's no crash. The next day, I don't feel super sore. I'm much less robotic on this than I am on modafinil. So it seems like for me, it's a really solid option for productivity. But then I also notice when I look at my self quantification data, such as my Aura Ring or my Hanu Health continuous heart rate variability monitor, that I'm not in a sympathetic dominant state throughout the day like I am on most of the other nootropics, including caffeine.
There you go.
Yeah, that's exactly what Ben Greenfield told us.
Hmm.
Yeah, like interestingly, I don't. This is really at the anecdotal point right now. We need more feedback from um, people that have these wearables and track HRV. But I've seen fairly consistently that one, like we talked about before, caffeine is negatively impacting HRV. No
Yeah.
surprise, right? But we're seeing people that are using paraxanthine are improving HRV over not using either compound. So
Wow.
that's like, what?
Yeah.
And again, this could be related to the improvement of cognitive health. So
Hmm.
it's really interesting. Like there's a lot to really explore there, and I don't have all the answers yet, but um, we're really at the kind of at the genesis of so much of this data.
Yeah, it's very cool. What are the things that you guys like to combine with that? And that can be lifestyle practices such as getting outside in the sun, in blue light, or it can be a certain kind of exercise. It can be resistance training, or it can be certain other molecules and compounds.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I find, I guess there's really two occasions I'm pairing an update with a lifestyle choice. And for me, update's my primary source of infinity and paraxanthine. That would be really the gym and in kind of like strength training. I think the kind of like swagger that Shawn alluded to earlier, that motivation, I think, really helps, and really keeps me switched on throughout my 45 minutes hour of training. And then the other time of day is really if I need to like hunker down and focus and just crush my to do list.
Mm.
And you just want no distractions, you just want to get something done. But dissimilarly to other kind of focus aids such as an Adderall, where you feel like you're on like blinders like this and you don't want to be social, update has the not only does it help you stay focused, but there's also this element of like wanting to be social on it, so you don't feel so claustrophobic.
Yeah, it's the same for me. That's a great way to put it. Like same for me is like I use it prior to going to the gym, and also when I want to be productive. And like you were saying, Nick, that for me it's like taking, yeah, like a, I don't know, like a third or a half of like a new vigil or something along those lines. And I feel extremely productive. Like I'm just knocking stuff out, and there's really, that's the only other compound that I like could almost compare it to, or like almost like microdosing or something. Sometimes like I feel more productive and kind of neuroplastic and kind of knocking things out as well. It's similar, like
Mm.
those are the kind of things that I could compare it to. It has a zero connection. Literally, so just today, I'll tell you a story. Like, I'm in the supplement business. I formulate for a ton of companies. I've been looking at that Prime company from the Paul brothers, right? So I was trying the other day. I tried their hydration drink, and I thought it was pretty good. And a friend of mine was telling me to try a different flavor. So I was in the grocery store this morning, and I grabbed what I thought was the hydration drink, and it was their energy drink. And I drank half of it. It has 200 milligrams of caffeine. I am a very slow metabolizer. And I was like,
Oh,
oh God, like literally like within 20 minutes, like my head was pounding. I was like, what? It's like hydration drink. I'm supposed to like feel better, not worse. And I'm like, damn, it says energy at the bottom. I didn't even know they made an
oh,
energy drink. I thought it was just this electrolyte drink. And I'm like, oh God. So like I
And it's
still
packed
have a
with
headache.
sucralose.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like
Yeah. I
sickly
still have
sweet.
a yeah. And so I still have a headache from hours ago and only drinking half of that thing. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's like caffeine is a nightmare, absolute nightmare.
What about increasing the effects you feel out of paraxanthine or update? If I was to take, say, some C8 MCT oil, or I was to stack it with something like a different ingredient, could I enhance certain facets of the experience, whether it's the memory effect or it's the motivation or it's the
Yeah.
any of the other facets of it?
Yeah, no, I think that's you're on the right path there. I think like anything that's elevating ketones could probably have some synergy with it. So whether you're taking exogenous ketones, ketone esters, that C8 MCTs, glycogen depletive exercise, dihydroberberine or berberine, fasting, intermittent fasting or extended fasting, things that are going to increase ketones, which the brain prefers for fuel, especially if you're metabolically dysfunctional, which 87% of Americans are, then yeah, I think that would kind of amp up the effect of update even more. And obviously just having it on an empty stomach versus having it with food would have a greater effect. Again, do not use it in conjunction with caffeine. It would increase some effect, but it's going to feel like a very dirty effect. And it's quite possible that when you're co-administering caffeine with paraxanthine, I don't know this for sure, but like you may actually be preventing the caffeine from converting to paraxanthine because you're co-administering them. So you may actually be pushing it down the path of like theobromine and theophylline and getting even more side effects.
Oh man.
So like this is just, you don't want to do that. So I think that's important to point out too.
One thing we did not mention, which I'm now remembering, is the dose equivalent to caffeine. Say someone is used to having 1 cup of coffee, around 100 milligrams of caffeine, and these cans, I believe, contain 300 milligrams of paraxanthine. How does that equate? How do they choose how much of the can to drink?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Shawn jump in after, but I think the way I describe it is it's really hard to answer that question, because if you're someone who's actually tried Update and tried Paraxanthine Infinity, the experience is so far different from caffeine. Like Shawn mentioned, it's 10 times less toxic. So you can drink far greater quantities of paraxanthine, or consume far greater quantities of paraxanthine than caffeine before you would ever feel some kind of a side effect.
Yeah.
So I think it's, you wouldn't say, well, if I'm used to drinking 100 milligrams of caffeine, 70 to 80% of it breaks down into paraxanthine, which is equivalent to 70 to 80 milligrams. It's going to be really different, because if you have 70 to 80 milligrams of caffeine, you're going to also exhibit the side effects, which you don't get from the equivalent amount or more of paraxanthine.
Yeah, essentially, like if you are a slow metabolizer, there is no equivalent. Like you're like in hell with just about like me. I had maybe 100 milligrams this morning, and I had a splitting headache within 30 minutes, and I still feel that headache hours later. So for me, there's people that have genetic issues. It's not only like 10 and a half, 12 hours. Like there's people that can't metabolize caffeine. It's literally truly toxic at any level. And they've shown like 168 hours later, like that's their half-life. It's like it's taking weeks and weeks and weeks to eliminate this stuff. Like, so, for a lot of us out there, it's hard to say what an equivalent dose is. I mean, I can calculate equivalence based on, the percentage conversion that, you could say, oh, like this is like similar to, whatever, 350 milligrams of caffeine. It's not. It has no correlation. Like it's like that level of caffeine would destroy me. So this is nothing like that. Super, super clean.
So again, you can drink half of a can if you're worried, and then if you feel good, you can increase and see what it feels like to add a little more and titrate up slowly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Are there any kryptonite foods or supplements that you don't want to combine with it to like prevent blunting the effects, such as maybe essential amino acids or anything along those lines?
Nothing that comes off the top for me. Again, like just avoiding anything with other methylxanthine sources. this would not, like, I wouldn't, even though I'm responsible for T-creen and dynamine, I wouldn't be stacking it with that. I wouldn't be stacking it with caffeine. I wouldn't stack it with theobromine or, things like that. And again, like having food with it would certainly potentially blunt it, especially like, like a heavy fat source is going to like delay its effects. Um, anything with a lot of fiber or gums would like delay transit, as well. But those are the only things I can think of. I mean, the fact that it's actually in kind of a very small and drinkable can, like it hits quick, like, but you feel great all day. So um, I think it's perfectly formulated.
Yeah, I mean, my experience mirrors yours so far. The formula I found impressive so far. Are there any things else around paraxanthine or update specifically that you guys would like to cover today?
I can't think of anything, Daniel. You got like a great capper?
I didn't know there's a great kappa, but I think you can find Paraxanthine Infinity and Update. You can buy Update. It's in hundreds of stores in New York City. It's on Amazon. It's on drinkupdate.com, which is our website. That would be where to find it.
Yeah, and if you guys go through the website, you can use, I believe it is the code URBAN, and that will save you 10% on your order.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it's experiential. I'm telling you, like, try it. The rate at which we get positive feedback, I can't even think of a single person that's told me it didn't work for them. I can't think, and I've been like knee deep in this ingredient for years now, and I can't think of someone saying, I didn't really get anything from it. Maybe like the degree to how much they love it, but like no one's like, nah, that kind of sucked. Like no one says that. Like, and I can tell you, having worked on tons of compounds, that I mean, you're lucky to get like a 60% approval rating on an ingredient, like to have something just almost consistently, unanimously be loved across the board is pretty unique. So I would definitely encourage people to just give it a shot and see how much you experience it, you love it, how much it changes your day.
Yeah, and Nick, I think whether you include this in the podcast or not, I think what would be really cool is to hand select a group of people from your community, and let's see, like cut caffeine for 2 weeks. We'll use Update instead, and see if you can make the switch.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. I like that. And over my years of trying different nootropics, I've tried probably about 153 different ingredients, stacks, products, you name it. Daniel sent me a couple to try, and this is one of the few products that I actually shelled out some of my own cold hard cash to get a new variety pack. So thank you for that. And thank you both for joining me on the podcast today. If people are interested in connecting with you, how do they find you on the internet?
Yeah, I mean, you can contact us at Drink Update on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Or Daniel Solomon's is me, and you can find me somewhere in the Ethernet.
Beautiful.
And for me, it's at Shawn Wells on Instagram, SHAWN. I have ShawnWells.com, and energyformula.com is my book. And I have that available in Audible and hardcover, softcover, ebook, coming out with a chorus for it. So anyway, there's a lot of ways that I can support. I have really great information on my Instagram, a lot of like infographics, everything's free. And on my website, ShawnWells.com, I have a newsletter every week that's just free science information. I'm not pushing anything, selling anything. So just love to educate and to help. And that's what I'm here to do.
Yep. Shawn, I read your energy formula book on Kindle a while back. Will you very quickly just break down the acronym, what they all stand for?
Yeah. And thank you for reading it. So energy is experiment, like looking at those kinds of variables and doing the testing. Nutrition exercise, routines, growth, and your tribe. And I'm on right now with my tribe. I'm loving this conversation. So, thank you for having us on today. And any way I can help in the future, answer questions, whether it's on infinity, whether it's on biohacking, psychedelics, like mental health. I talk a lot about depression and suicidal thoughts, of which I've dealt with. So, however I can help, please let me know.
Thank you. You're not getting off quite that easy because you have not answered the question yet that all guests answer. And that is, if there was a worldwide burning of the books and all knowledge on earth is lost, you get to save the works of 3 teachers. Who would you choose and why?
Okay. Go, Daniel. Or do you want me to
I mean, I didn't know that I have 3 teachers, but I think the one person who I think I most respect when it comes to building a knowledge base is, and as corny as this might sound, is like my dad. I don't think I've met someone that's as bright and motivational and such an inspiration, who has really passed down all the knowledge to me. So that would probably be my one, maybe less creative, but at least it's honest answer to that one. Shawn, have you got a better one?
So like my top list, if I'm answering this correctly, and of course, I guess I'm leaving off my own book, but Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, I think, is an amazing book because you get to see it's unique in that you get to see the through line of all these people that have been brilliant and successful, and there is this through line of that they all have a great morning routine, and they all have like this optimistic, can-do, resilient mindset. That's kind of a through line, is those two things. Simon Sinek's book, Start With Your Why, was pretty profound for me. I'm going to say Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. I'm a huge fan of Stoicism, and that's really like the resilient mentality. And then lastly, the most important book I've ever read in my life that really had, I can't even state this, like how profound it was The Four Agreements. That changed everything for me. That was a massive mindset shift. I'm so glad that he wrote that. Like, I mean, it actually changed my life path pretty dramatically. So those would be the books that I would say.
Well, it's rare that I know and I'm familiar with and I've read all of the resource recommendations, and that was one case. So thank you both for sharing those. And the final question for both of you: what is one thing that your tribe does not know about you?
What is one thing?
I'm quite a transparent, open person here.
I'm thinking this is a tough one. Probably
we'll need
that
to
I'm
save
just
the
like
answer.
I think I'm such a nerd, like, and not just like a nerd in terms of like science, but like literally, like I am like a sci-fi dork. Like I love and fantasy. Like I love Lord of the Rings, I love Harry Potter, I love Star Wars, Star Trek. Like I am a massive dork for all of that stuff, and I love it. Like The Mandalorian, like you name it, like that stuff like is my jam. I know all the names. I know like the planets and the like robots names. Like it's kind of silly. So that's probably something that I don't bring up a lot, but that would be one. Yeah.
I like it.
Good. I think for me, I have a keyboard hidden in my closet over here. I think it comes out when no one else is at home, and that's like my form of therapy.
That kind of keyboard.
That kind of
keyboard.
Musical keyboard.
Yeah.
Musical keyboard. Not an alphanumeric keyboard.
Musician. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Thank you both for joining me, Daniel and Shawn. It's been a pleasure chatting today on the Mind Body Peak Performance Podcast.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.